What would you do if the most powerful woman in the city turned to you, a janitor, and whispered, "Pretend you love me for 10 minutes in front of everyone. One choice, 10 minutes, and nothing will ever be the same again." From where are you watching this story? Drop a comment below. I'm curious. The chandeliers fell like constellations from the ceiling, dripping ice-white light across the marble. Champagne hissed when poured. Sequins flashed like tiny cameras on glittering gowns. Somewhere behind the glass wall of the gallery, a quartet stitched violins into a silk thread that threaded the crowd together, whether they liked it or not. Clara Albrecht stood at the center of it, spine a high wire between her shoulder blades, the kind of balance you learn only by falling when no one is watching. Her dress was midnight, slit like a command, the hem dark as ink against the cold stone. Power haloed her, the way heads tipped toward her, how waiters watched her glass, how a circle opened wherever her heels clicked. But her left hand pinched the thin stem of the flute, so tight a hairline crack crept toward the bowl. A detail no one should notice. He noticed. Daniel Rivera was not meant to be in the ballroom. Not with the chemical clean tang still clinging to him, hands smelling faintly of bleach and orange solvent. Not with worn sneakers printing damp half-moons on the polished marble. He'd handled a burst pipe in the kitchen. The sous chef had panicked about the carpet. Security had waved him through by the service corridor with a pinched look. Quick, man. No fuss. And then, carried by need and steam and misplaced courage, he walked straight into the galaxy. Executives glittered. Watchful staff traced the edges like stars that refused to burn. One woman wrinkled her nose as he passed by with his tool bag, breathing in gold and champagne in recoil. He hugged the dark walls, instinctively half invisible, the way people taught him to be without ever saying it out loud. At the bottom of the marble stairs framed by an arch of orchids, Clara turned her head. A precise mechanical turn, and her gaze caught him. He tried to look away. That gaze held. She took one step, another. The board chair, Evan Roth, silver hair like polished frost, murmured something at her elbow. Her smile to him was a blade. Then she crossed the space between worlds. "Pretend you love me for 10 minutes, she said. The violins played on. His grip on the wrench folded, metal warming beneath his palm. There was no laughter in her eyes, no flirt, only a hard light, like the moment before glass shatters. "Oh, what?" he pushed out. No rehearsal could have cut the panic from his voice. "Now," she said, softer, not asked. And more people were looking, and because they were, his own body betrayed him and stepped closer, as if to shield her from the gaze she invited. Her perfume was jasmine with something metallic under it. Her hand, cool, perfect, landed on his forearm like an order. Evan Roth's hand twitched at his cufflink. "Clara?" His smile curled. "Introduce us." The quartet changed key. A camera flash popped and vanished. Words zipped and stuck. "Who is he?" "That's the janitor." "No, he can't be." Bold choice. Cold marble under Daniel's soles. Glittering gowns like hostile fish turning their bellies toward him. He had never felt the distance between a second-hand shirt and a custom tuxedo so acutely. "This is Daniel," Clara said, her mouth a public shape and her eyes entirely private. He's the only person in this room who won't lie to me." A hook snagged on silence. The nearest cluster of executives blinked like owls. Daniel didn't know where to put his face. The weight on his arm increased. Her nails, crescent moons against his sleeve, trembled. It lasted a heartbeat. He could have imagined it. "Pleasure," Evan said. With that leisure-class drawl you couldn't learn, offering Daniel a hand he never intended to shake properly. "And what do you do for our Clara?" The emphasis on our made Daniel want to scrub his skin. He swallowed. "What I'm told," he said. Usually. Evan's eyes glinted. "Tonight's different." He felt her small intake of air through his sleeve and didn't know why that mattered. Another camera flash. Someone laughed too brightly. The champagne tower chimed crystal on crystal as a waiter bumped the table with his hip and the whole structure shivered. Every sound seemed magnified. The quartet's bow hairs might as well have been sawing at the inside of his skull. Clara leaned in without turning her head. Her lips were close enough to brush his jaw if she breathed too hard. "Don't let go," she said. Not to him, maybe to gravity. He didn't. They moved together, a choreography invented on the fly. He adjusted the weight of his tool bag so the strap didn't bite his collarbone. She lifted her chin, letting gossip bounce off it like rain from a slicker. 100 eyes measured, priced, sorted. "Mr. Roth," she said brightly, "louder now, you'll excuse us. I promised Daniel the secret view from the balcony. He's fond of views." People tittered. Someone whispered, "God, the nerve," as if nerve were a luxury item you had to source from Italy. "Enjoy," Evan said, smile fixed. Then his head tilted, listening to something only he could hear. Someone in his earpiece or the shape of an opportunity in the room's temperature. "We'll talk after the announcement." Announcement. A small word printed in heavy font. They stepped onto the balcony, into cold air that still smelled of champagne. The city thrown out below like a deck of cards. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and set the tool bag down. His hand was damp where she'd held him. He rubbed his palm on his pants leg and left the outline of his cleaning chemicals there like a signature. "What is this?" he said. Not a question exactly, and not just to her. "My board is trying to kill me," she said, and blinked once, as if she'd heard the wrong words leave her mouth. He stared. A siren cut a faraway line through the night. "Right, they're not subtle," she said, the edge back, "but they're patient. And they require a spectacle. I gave them a different one. You dragged me into a spectacle." He looked down at his scuffs on the cold marble. "I'm maintenance. I fix what breaks. I'm not—" "You're the only one they didn't expect," she said. "The only variable I control. You control." It was a look that knew names it shouldn't. And honest love. The word turned like a knife. He made it home after midnight with his shoulders hunched against the city wind. The hallway bulb flickered. That same stutter he kept meaning to complain about. And he winced at the noise of his key anyway, though he'd oiled the lock himself. Sophia slept on the fold-out, head fallen off the pillow onto her sketchbook, pencil still tucked behind her ear. The apartment was a patchwork of careful economies. Second-hand shirts folded with pride, a plant from the neighbor who moved away, the soft hum of the cheap fridge like a person whispering to itself. The lemon cleaner he used on weekends battled the odor of the building's old pipes, and for once, he removed the pencil from behind Sophia's ear and placed it beside her drawing. A fox with two large eyes stared up from the page, a cape billowing behind it. He smiled despite the churn in his stomach. Her lashes fluttered. "Papa," she said into the couch cushion, "you smell like fancy soaps." He glanced at his shirt. The perfume was still there. "Just a different kind of mess tonight, Mija. You fix it?" She mumbled, "Not yet." He kissed her temple. "Sleep." He showered until his knuckles stopped smelling like the ballroom. In the steam, Evan's voice crawled back over his skin the way he had shaped Sophia's name. Rage bloomed with the heat. He imagined knocking on Evan Roth's front door and... What? He knew men like that. The door would never open for him. His phone buzzed on the sink. "Unknown number. You've got Nerve Rivera." Then another, "Watch your step. She doesn't save men like you twice." He wiped his hand on the towel and typed without thinking, "Who are you?" 3 dots, then nothing. 10 minutes, he said out loud to the empty bathroom, which always sounded like it had an audience. What a joke. He lay awake long after the apartment settled. Morning. The city softened just a little. He packed Sophia's lunch. Peanut butter on fresh bread. If he cut off the crusts just right, she'd eat the whole thing. Can we talk after drop-off?" Sophia's attention slid to the car, the driver whose hands were too still. Then to Clara's left wrist, a thin white line there, faded like an old bracelet cut off. Kids notice different things. "Is that a scar?" Clara looked startled. Then, for reasons Daniel could not have guessed if you gave him 100 questions, she smiled. "From when I tried to climb a fence that didn't want to be climbed." She crouched to Sophia's height, the CEO gone for a second. "Does your fox ever try stupid things because it refuses to be told it can't?" Sophia's face lit. "Always." But then it learns a new way. Clara's jaw worked once. Of course it does, Sophia tilted her head. You talk like my art teacher, I wish, Clara murmured, then stood. 5 minutes, she said to Daniel. Please. He watched Sophia disappear past the crossing guard in a bloom of backpacks. He listened for the slam of the school's old door. That heavy wood thud he'd learned was the sound of safety. Then he followed Clara to the car, refused to get in, and she didn't ask again. They stood on the sidewalk under a tree that had more winter than leaves in it. You used me, he said. Yes, she said. You don't get points for honesty. I'm not asking for points. She looked past him, as if measuring the street for threats. A vote was scheduled for tonight's gala, an ambush. They needed to isolate me. They needed proof the shareholders would believe. I needed to show them I'm not alone. They watch my life like hawks. They know my every friend by habit. You were the one angle they didn't anticipate. You mean the help, he said. The invisible guys. Her flinch was small. I mean the man who knows where the building's bones creak, who knows when a door that looks locked is rehearsed, he said, because he heard it. How it fit in her mouth like something she'd practiced. And still, my kid. How do they know her name? I can guess. The line tightened at her mouth. One of my senior team has been feeding Evan for months. I'm not sure who. He has everything. Photo of your employment form. List of emergency contacts. It wouldn't have taken much. He threatened my daughter. He threatened me through your daughter, she said. That's worse. He blinked. It's the same. No, her voice scraped, not in my math. Nothing about her made sense, and too much did. He had been around power long enough to know that it often did the right thing for the wrong reason, and sometimes that mattered less than the right thing itself. Why is he doing this? Daniel asked. Because I refused to sell something that would have made the stock jump and burn a neighborhood down. Her gaze hit his, steady. Bay Hollow is one of our old plants. The remediation cost is. She broke off at his look. It's complicated. People live there, he said. Yes, and in your math, they matter more than a stock chart. Today, she said dryly, it seems so. Mini hooks swung in the air, sharp on their edges. He didn't trust her. He wanted to. He did not want to. Tonight there's a closed door, she said, meaning boardroom. Come, half an hour. Pretend again if you can stand it. It buys me time. It buys you cover. I have work, he said out of reflex. Yes, she said. Come in your uniform. You sure? I'm sure about very few things, she said. But I'm sure Evan pays attention to pageantry. He needs to see you. What am I to you that makes him angry? Daniel asked. Careful, because sometimes the answer to that kind of question can get in your clothes for days. She worked her jaw again. An answer to a question I should have asked years ago. That didn't help. He made himself nod once. He turned to go, then stopped. If you know where he keeps his knives, he said, you need guards who are loyal to you, not the company. I'm not sure I have any of those, she said, and that terrible lonely honesty again. And he hated that his chest hurt hearing it. He walked until the building hid the car from him. The coin laundry's door jingled, and a dog barked like punctuation. When he got home that night, there was an envelope under his door. No return address, just his name in a hand that printed each letter like a tiny building with a foundation. Inside, a photograph. It had been taken years ago. He could see it in the grain, the warmth that newer phones burn out of faces. 2 women laughing. One of them turned slightly away, hair pulled back. You couldn't see her profile, just the edge of a scar on her left wrist. The other, his breath stopped, was his wife, Marisol. Younger, the vein in her temple like a blue thread. In the corner of the image, a cheap plastic bracelet like the ones hospitals clip on wrists when they want to own you for a while. The photo was cut weird, like someone had chopped a third person out of it, or shaved the background for a reason that made his stomach turn. On the back, a note in the same careful block letters. Ask her what she owed. Ask her why she never paid. His hands shook so hard the picture bowed. He sat down on the bed without feeling it. He turned the photo back over, traced the sliver of a scar with his thumb, the knock on the fence. The fox that learned a new way, his mouth tasted like metal. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Tick-tock. Albrecht Holdings' boardroom was an aquarium of glass. Expensive fish in chairs looking out over a city they believed they owned. The table was pale wood with a slit down the center, like a surgical opening. The speakers in the ceiling were invisible and everywhere. Even the water glasses looked more important than most people. Daniel's shoes squeaked once on polished floor. He fought the urge to apologize to the stone. Evan Roth's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly when Daniel entered behind Clara. Interesting. The anger wasn't at his presence. It was at Clara's comfort with it, as if she'd had time to grow comfortable. CFO Sunil Patel sat on the left, expression sealed. Fingers interlaced so perfectly, Daniel wondered if she practiced that too. Legal counsel, two independents who never spoke unless their fees compelled them to. And the head of security, a square-jawed man named Merton, whose eyes seemed to bounce just behind your shoulder like he was always late to his own gaze. "Let's be expedient," Evan said. "We all have places to be." Clara sat like a gun laid gently on the table. She didn't look at Daniel, and he was grateful. He took up his post at the wall near the water service like a man who belonged in the furniture. "Bay Hollow," Evan said, letting the syllables travel through a tidy graphic on the screen. A map with a shaded circle around a neighborhood that had once smelled like bread. A bakery, a whole row of them, before the plant went up. "We have an offer. We should take it." "There's arsenic in the soil," Sunil said calmly, like she was discussing calendars. "Remediation scheduled. Selling now simply kicks the cleanup to someone else. Local press will eat us alive the first time a kid gets sick." Evan's smile thinned. "Our duty is to shareholders, not children whose parents cannot read a deed." Sunil didn't blink. "Shareholders are also people. They don't like lawsuits." "You've always been so charming when numbers talk," Evan said, and turned to Clara. Clara, she did not look at him. She looked at the window. The city didn't blink either. "We're not selling." Her voice was steady as a meter. "So you say," Evan said lightly. But we're not," she repeated. And this time everyone heard the click of a door somewhere inside a vault. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain your own conflict of interest." He reached into a soft leather folder, the color of blood, and retrieved a printout that made Sonal's lip curl. "Hard copy, Evan? In this room? Amateur hour." But then he flicked a photograph across the table like a small flat grenade. Clara did not touch it. No one did. Evan turned it around himself slow, letting the moment bear his weight. "A donation. Sizable," he purred. "From your personal funds years ago to a hospital foundation in the Bay Hollow district. Anonymized via a little shell I'm sure was registered solely to streamline your generosity." "You're a saint, Clara. One wonders to whom you prayed." Sonal's gaze slipped toward Clara and then away. Not surprise, worry. In Daniel's pocket, the photo from his doorway felt like it had grown teeth. "It's called being a citizen," Clara said. "You should try it," Evan smiled. "Careful, dear. Citizens pay taxes." "But that's not the conflict. The conflict is your very public romantic entanglements." He glanced at the glass door. It opened on cue. A woman from PR, pale with fear, hurried in and placed a tablet in front of Clara. A video played on mute. Last night on the balcony, Clara's hand on Daniel's arm, the angle chosen for maximum implication. A caption found love or power play, users commenting, "Hearts blooming like a rash." "Congratulations," Evan said. Sweetness spilling out like syrup. "It seems the help sweeps more than floors." Daniel's vision went white for a second. He unclenched his jaw to make sure his teeth hadn't fused. Clara didn't look at the tablet. "We're done," she said, and stood. Evan did not stand. "You cannot walk out of this room and pretend you're not bleeding. This is an emergency session." "This is what it is," she said. "Is a man bored with his toys?" It was a line crafted to be repeated. It would be by people who didn't know what it cost to say it. The room shifted, small movements, the way a school of fish chooses a direction without voting. The head of security, Merton, didn't look at anyone when he pushed his chair back to follow Clara. Daniel stepped aside. Merton brushed too close and muttered, "Low." A rumble shaped into words. "You shouldn't be here, Rivera. Then tell your boss to stop inviting me." In the hall, Clara moved like the floor was tilted, faster, then faster. The glass walls reflected her 100 times. The same woman multiplied into a crowd that might have been lonely if any of them could touch. She stopped only when they reached the stairwell that ran like a spine through the building. She hit the door with her palm. It didn't budge. Nobody used the stairs here unless the elevators broke, or they wanted to pretend at virtue. "Keycard," she snapped, and Daniel had it out before the word finished. He swiped his. The reader bleeped disapproval. He swiped again, angrier, like you could persuade electronics. "Mine," she said, and her card worked like magic, worked for people who could afford it. The stairwell smelled like concrete and cleaning solution. He was suddenly, achingly in his element. "Where?" he said. "Roof," she said, already taking steps 2 at a time. "I can get a clean call up there," to whom he didn't ask, and wasn't sure he wanted to know. 3 flights up. The light above the landing went out. The stairwell plunged to humdark. Somewhere below, a door banged. "Back," Daniel said, hand out, and hated the way her shoulder shaped itself into his palm like it belonged there. A shadow detached from the floor like it had been waiting with its breath held. "Merton," Clara said. The shape came closer, not answering. The kind of silence that thought it was clever. A scuffle of shoe against concrete. Then a hand gloved, reached for Clara's wrist. Daniel moved without thinking. The wrench he hadn't set down clanged once as it knocked bone. A grunt. The scent of latex like cheap balloon. He caught cloth, pulled. The mask snapped back like a cartoon and then tore. Not Merton, one of Merton's men. The one who checked badges downstairs, the one with a too careful smile. The man's mouth twisted. "You should have stayed downstairs with your mop, Rivera." Something mean edged into Daniel's voice of its own accord. "I brought it with me." He swung the heavy handle into the man's shin, and pain sang in the stairwell, low and furious. The man went down and caught himself with fingers that would bruise tomorrow. "He sent you," Clara said, breathing too fast. "Who sent you?" The man laughed, a little breathless wheeze. "Does it matter? She'll never forgive you if she knew what you did to her." What had Daniel started? The man kicked for Clara's ankle. Daniel blocked, grabbed, levered, the same motions he used to force a stuck door to admit the truth. The man slid 2 steps and smacked his shoulder hard into the metal railing. A second door banged somewhere above now. Voices, Merton's voice this time. "Sharp, stand down." Clara's hand found the back of Daniel's shirt. It shook, she stilled it by force. "Move," she said, and for once he didn't argue. He propelled her up. The head of security hit his own men hard with his eyes when they crossed on the landing. Evan's voice floated through the stairwell in Daniel's head. "Honest love." On the roof, the wind cut at them with wet fingers. The city lifted its face. She bent over, palms on her knees, and let the wind unknot her hair. It made her look younger and less composed, and more like a person he might have known on a bus. He tried not to watch her mouth shape air back into lungs. "What did that mean?" he said when his own breathing calmed enough for syntax. "She'll never forgive you if she knew what you did to her." "I didn't. People who hate me write poems inside threats," she said. He meant it to hurt. It worked. She steadied. "We need to get ahead of it." "Of my non-existent sins?" "Of his," she said, "and mine." Wind knocked something metal into something else, and the clatter made both of them flinch. He saw her shiver and looked down involuntarily. Bare shoulders. The dress was an armor that didn't cover where the wind bit. Before he could think better of it, he shrugged off his work jacket. She stared at it like it was an object from a foreign planet. "It smells like lemon," she said. "Better than fear," he said, and somehow the joke didn't make him want to punch himself. She slid her arms into it with a reluctance that was pride, not disgust. The sleeves were too long. On her body, the jacket looked absurd and good and wrong. She zipped it halfway like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to wear help. Inside, he said, "Before someone with a camera gets the two of us on a roof in a bad coat." Her phone vibrated in her hand. Sudden, violent. One word on the screen. He saw it because she let him. "Bay, what?" he asked. "It's starting," she said. "They'll call for a vote. Then they'll leak." Then she glanced at him. "They'll ask what you are to me, and the wrong answer will ruin us both." He threw his head back at the sky for strength he didn't believe in. Right answer being, "Stay," she said, stumbling over the word and then catching herself. For a little longer. Every few steps since the gala had been a hook, pulling him forward. He was starting to wonder if he wasn't walking so much as getting reeled in. Before they reached the door, it opened. Sonal stood there, breath notched, hair slightly out of place for the first time Daniel had ever seen. "We have a problem," she said, and her eyes flicked to the jacket on Clara and flicked away. "And I'm not sure which problem it is." The problem, it turned out, was every problem stacked on top of one another, like somebody had built a tower from heavy boxes and expected no one to sneeze. "We're missing a drive," Sonal said, as she clicked the conference room door behind them. "The only clean copy of the environmental audit. The copy that says, unambiguously, that selling Bay Hollow is a crime in slow motion." "Where?" Clara said. "Where is not nearly as interesting as who and when," Sonal replied. "And how they got past locks you believe in." She didn't look at Daniel when she said it, but he felt considered anyway. It didn't feel bad. "Check the data closet on 26, he said, because he knew where the old equipment got put to die, and he knew what people thought died when they didn't like what it said. "I replaced the thermostat last week. The case sticks. If you don't know the trick, you leave the edge bent." Sonal stared. "How do?" "I installed the thermostat," he said. "I sweep, I mop, I keep the bones creaking the right way. Good news is I touch everything. Bad news is Evan knows that, which means he knows you know the building," Clara said. "He threatened Sophia," Daniel said, the name a shard between his teeth. "We'll move her," Clara said without thinking, and then blinked at her own mouth. "I mean, we can fund a no. We can do this, right? I'll call a driver, she'll have a shadow at school. I'll notify the principal under the pretense of..." "You don't get to pretend to be her mother." He snapped before the grateful part of him could reach his tongue. "You don't get to..." "I know," she said, and her voice dropped from CEO to weathered human being in a syllable. "I know." He wanted to take the words back and couldn't, so instead he took the corner of the table with both hands and anchored himself. "Find the drive," Sonal said, brisk to cut a bridge over a silence. "We make a show of it. We file an injunction downtown with a crowd and cameras. We get panned as martyrs for a week, then the sun turns and they forget. We buy time for the cleanup and for you to stop bleeding." She side-eyed Clara. "It is not a plan I recommend unless we like the taste of our own blood." "Do it," Clara said. The lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed at something that wasn't funny enough to deserve it. They went to 26. The data closet was, as Daniel had predicted, ajar in the way of something someone had forced and then pretended they hadn't. "Wedge," he said. "There's no wedge," Sonal said. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a stub of pasty white eraser, and slid it beneath the door with a low, practiced push. "Now there is." She studied him like a problem she was starting to enjoy solving. "Clara," she said without looking away, "you know my grandmother used to say the smartest men are the ones the rich fail to see." "Your grandmother was a communist," Clara murmured. "She was a realist." Inside, the air felt closeted and old. Daniel crouched. Dust swirled. He breathed through his mouth and found the expected scratch. Panel edge bent, hinge abused, the exact pattern of impatience he'd seen on broken equipment after certain executives were asked to assemble anything with a manual. "It's gone," Sonal reported from the rack, voice flat. "Surprised?" "I'm not surprised. Are you surprised?" "No," Clara said, "but I'm angry. Does that count?" When they came out, the head of security was leaning against the wall like a man bored in a good suit. "Ms. Albrecht," he said with the careful politeness of a gun on a coffee table. Mr. Rivera. He nodded, no warmth. We had an incident earlier. I'm handling it. You mean the part where your guy tried to play tackle in a stairwell, Daniel said. How's his shin, Merton? Sonal warned. Do not do the thing you do. What thing? Merton asked lazily, then tightened. I'll find who's moving Evan's pieces. It's not me. Cute that you specify, Sonal muttered. Do it faster than he expects. The board's emergency meeting was scheduled for 3. At 2:45, a rumor leaked. By 2:50, 2 interns had emailed their cousins from personal accounts and forgotten that sometimes cousins are the first reporters a story meets. By 2:57, a blogger with more adjectives than sources called Daniel a homewrecker of corporate ethics. He watched this from the outside of the glass, reflected back at himself, the man in the uniform who had nothing to do with the building he held together. The words slid over him in waves. He felt the shape of his daughter's name under each one, like a bruise pressed by strangers' thumbs. Come with me, Clara said. Where no one thinks to look for me. She led him through a service corridor that smelled like old paper and damp paint, a door with a metal plate scuffed at waist height. The storage closet, not his, another, this one full of promotional banners rolled in tubes and boxes, labeled holiday wreaths in a hand that was maybe Sonal's. She closed the door. It clicked. The sound softened the edges of the world. I'm sorry, she said. And the words were not corporate. You didn't deserve a part in this play. Nobody deserves their name in that man's mouth, he said. And, surprising himself, softened too. But here we are. You said it once. I was the one variable you could control. That true? For 10 minutes, she said. And then she laughed. A single startled bark. We're past 10. He recognized the exact degree of broken that made you laugh when you wanted to cry, and caught the sound like a glass slipping off a table. I'll be gone when this is over, he said, for her sake. He didn't specify whether he meant Sophia or Clara. She looked at the floor and then at him. I don't want you to be. The fluorescent light hummed. Someone wheeled a cart past the closet, musician soft, as if trying to write a soundtrack for an apology. You wanted a show, he said. You got one. No. She stepped closer. So close he smelled wind and jasmine and the lemon on his jacket, that odd mixture that would never be sold in a bottle. I wanted a way to slow a machine that turns neighborhoods into coins. I also wanted her mouth shut. What? Not to be alone in a room full of people waiting for me to fail, she said. I don't know how to ask for that without buying it, so I borrowed it instead. He stared at her. The line from the photograph in his pocket prickled his palm. Ask her what she owed. Ask her why she never paid. He wanted to ask. He did not know how to hold himself if she answered. Tell me something true, he said. That isn't a press release, she swallowed. I don't know how to sleep unless I can hear a refrigerator, the hum. It's stupid, she grimaced. It reminds me of a foster home I once lived in, the good one. There was a fridge that hummed like it had a song and a kitchen where no one yelled if you broke a glass. She laughed without humor. I bought a condo with 2 refrigerators, for no reason I could admit. He had not expected that. He saw her again in the car outside the school, noticing a scar on a child's eye-level view. He saw his own daughter measuring her, finding something familiar in a stranger. The photo in his pocket burned. You, he said, and drew the picture like a gun and held it between them. Explained. She looked at it. The edges of her face bent in on themselves without moving. Her fingers lifted and didn't touch. She breathed like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed. Where did you get that? She asked, voice small and even and deadly. It was under my door. He flipped it. There was a note. She read the back. Whatever light had been in her went off. She stood there in the dark. I loved her, she said. The closet became very quiet. Words clanged elsewhere. Loved who? He said. Though he knew, though he didn't, though his heart was beating like it wanted out. She looked at him with a steadiness that felt like apology, and something not remotely like it. Marisol, The door handle rattled before he could answer. Sonal's voice on the other side, urgent. "We have to go. It's start." "What is?" Daniel said, his mouth dry, throat full of something with edges. "The vote," Sonal said, "and the leak." He stepped back. The photo hung in the space between them like a lantern. Somebody forgot to turn off. He slid it back into his pocket with fingers that didn't know what they were doing. He no longer knew which direction the floor tilted. Clara opened the door. Her face had rearranged itself into the mask that looked like her. She was too good at it. He hated that too. "Coming," she said. In the hallway, a junior assistant hovered, then fled at the look on Clara's face. They reached the glass room. Reporters had materialized in the lobby like mushrooms after rain. PR had arranged a podium in front of the elevators. The board filed in slow, like a procession of saints who didn't believe in redemption. Evan, smiling like this, had all been thrown for him on a plate. Clara took a step toward her seat. Daniel put a hand out and caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to turn bone a different way. "Tell me something else true," he said, not sure what he was asking for, "before they start carving." She turned her hand, palm up into his briefly, a motion so intimate in its simplicity it felt indecent. "I don't know how to stop wanting to fix a thing that is already broken," she said. "And sometimes I think that's what love is, the wanting, even when it makes you stupid." "Clara," Evan called sweetly. "Shall we?" She removed her hand. It left heat. The board chair raised his gavel like in a parody of a courtroom. He spoke about fiduciary duty and optics and irresponsible emotional entanglements. He spoke about Bay Hollow like it was a line on a map, not a geography that made bread. He clicked to a slide. He was 10 minutes into his own performance when the building's power hiccuped. A single blink. A shadow rolled over the ceiling like a thought. The lead strip under the table flickered, blue to gray to blue again. A low thump from somewhere mechanical, the kind the building made when it was thinking about stopping. People's faces went a little green in the dark and perhaps showed the truth of them before the light returned. "That," Evan said with false good humor, "seems apropos." Daniel didn't move. He listened. He knew the building. The hiccup wasn't nothing. It was someone pulling on a wire. He slid a half step toward the door. Merton tracked him. Sonal's eyes flicked. Clara didn't look away from Evan. Daniel had the sudden, ridiculous feeling of standing in the aisle of a church where he didn't believe in any God and being asked, "Do you?" He realized he did. "Before we vote," Evan said, "I regret to inform you that evidence has been brought to my attention. Evidence of impropriety that compromises Ms. Albrecht's judgment." He lifted the printed photograph like a cheap magic trick that still worked when the audience wanted to be fooled. Her personal involvement with individuals materially linked to Bay Hollow. Her failure to disclose. Her previous relationship with a resident there. Clara's head snapped toward Daniel before she could stop it. The room tracked the motion like a pack. "And here," I'd thought. Evan said, our Clara had simply taken up with a mop for fun. Daniel's mouth filled with a copper taste. Pride and humiliation wrestled until pride pinned humiliation to the mat. He took a single step into the middle of the glass room. Sonal's lips parted. "No, he did it anyway. You want truth," he said. And his voice was not loud enough, and exactly loud enough. "My wife was a person, not a leak in a portfolio. She died in a hospital in your district while you took your vacation on a boat. She drew foxes with my daughter on bad days. You don't get to use her to make a point about me." "Sit down," Evan said, smiling. "We'll have you escorted." "Try," Daniel said. The word surprised him by how gentle it was. He returned to the wall where he belonged only because Clara's jaw unclenched at the sight of him moving. He would not be the reason she cracked early. "Vote," Evan said, satisfied. Like the train he'd called finally rolled into the station on time. The hands went up like they were paid to. When the hands fell, the anger in Daniel's body stood up like a person. It didn't ask permission. He looked at the fire sprinklers along the ceiling. He looked at the cooling unit above the server closet. He looked at the way Merton's gaze lagged half a beat behind Clara's shoulder again. The building whispered, "I will help you if you know where to touch me." He left the glass room in the middle of the vote like a man going to the bathroom. Unremarkable if you weren't looking. No one looked. Sonal's eyebrow twitched and then resumed being neutral. He passed the receptionist who had perfected invisibility and saw her flinch when he met her eyes. Someone had told her to look through him, and she wasn't good at cruelty. In the janitor's closet he knew best. He grabbed the long aluminum pole he used to change light bulbs in atriums. He slung an orange extension cord over his shoulder. He looked like a man about to commit a minor crime, because he was. He went to the panel behind the conference center, where PR staged speeches, and found the fire alarm relay he'd repaired last winter, when a burst pipe turned an awards dinner into a baptism. It took 5 heartbeats and the flat of his palm to make the relay consider options it didn't know it had. In the glass room, water came down like rain that had been waiting months to fall. The word fiduciary duties drowned in a hiss. People shouted about silk. Phones slipped. PR shrieked about hair. Merton swore into his radio and discovered radios are not waterproof. Daniel walked calmly back in through the side door, carrying a yellow caution sign. Because committing to a bit is a kind of genius no one expects from the man who mops. He set the sign gently in the doorway. Wet floor. Evan turned on him with fury that did not care for optics. "What did you do?" "Your building's crying," Daniel said. "Must be a leak." He pointed at the ceiling. "I fix what breaks." Sonal started laughing quietly into her hand, like a woman whose mouth had just found a seam the needle missed. Her laughter was not happy. It had teeth. Clara stood without hurry in the rain. She looked like a war had ended on her shoulders, and no one told her whether she won. Water beaded along her hairline and ran down her collarbone. She lifted a hand and brushed it away like a choice. She looked at Daniel as if he had just invented her a minute instead of a miracle. "This is an emergency," Evan snapped, and someone echoed him on a radio that spat like a cat. "Clear the room. We can finish in the small boardroom," one of the independents offered, soaked, plaintive. "No," Sonal said, the word riding neatly under the chaos. She tapped her phone and held it up. "While you were doing your striptease for the shareholders, I filed our injunction on the Bay Hollow sale with the county clerk. I CC'd every journalist who still knows the cost of a human body. The audit is missing, so we filed with its absence as Exhibit A. The court will love that." "What audit?" Evan said too smoothly. "The one you took," Sonal said pleasantly. "I have taken nothing," Evan said, and the words had that carefully lawyered stiffness that always looks guilty. "Funny," Sonal said. "Because your assistant tried to upload a large file to a private Dropbox labeled Roth Family Vacation, while the power hiccuped on 20. And because I know how to read IP logs without moving my mouth." She looked at Merton. "Your men are not as careful as they think with their browsing histories." Merton's jaw went tight. "Sonal, focus," she said. "We have 20 minutes before the story becomes not ours again." Evan's face did a sequence of things in quick succession. Denial, charm, anger, calculation, all the gears in a very expensive watch whirring at once. He flung his waterlogged gavel down, and it made an undignified clack. He stepped toward Clara, forgot the floor was wet, and slipped just enough to make grace impossible. Daniel's hand shot out to catch him. He let it miss. "Careful," Daniel said. "You think this saves you?" Evan hissed at Clara, water slicking back his silver hair in a way that made him look a little less inevitable. "Even if you block the sale, you're compromised. Your janitor lover is a conflict of—" "Stop," Clara said. And the sound of the word was a different thing than all the versions of it she had deployed in all the rooms she had ever ruled. "Stop talking about him as if he were furniture you could kick. He is furniture. He is the reason your sprinklers know how to cry," she said. "He is the reason the 6th floor didn't flood last winter. He is the reason my building breathes. He is a father. And he is the man I asked to lie for me in a room full of people whose job description is lying. And he did it with more honor than any of you can afford. You just confessed, Evan purred, teeth bright. To asking for help, she said. Yes. She turned then slowly toward the reporters who were already filming from the hall like children at an aquarium. The drenched executives made excellent television. Clara reached down, took her shoes off, and set them under the table. She stepped barefoot into the puddle and didn't wince at the cold. You want a show? She said, voice level, eyes on the camera lens like it was a person who might actually listen. Here, watch me say a thing you aren't supposed to say if you like your job. We are not selling Bay Hollow because human beings who live in houses worth less than this dress matter, more than this quarter's earnings. We're going to clean it up, and we're going to pay for it. And I am going to take every call about it from people who hate me, and I am going to deserve some of that hate. But we will not make the poor pay for our rush. Clara, Sonal said under her breath, warning. The board, Clara kept looking at the lens. If that costs me this chair, she said. Fine, I'll sit somewhere else and still have the same spine. You cannot threaten the board from inside its house, Evan snapped. I'm not threatening you, she said. I'm telling the truth, a thing you wouldn't recognize if it tipped your boat. He lunged toward the microphone that wasn't there. In the commotion, Sophia slipped into the doorway like a fox through a fence. Daniel's heart stopped moving. She wore her raincoat and a backpack twice the size of her chest. Ms. Lane, her teacher, hovered behind her like a woman who knows she's violating 5 policies and is past caring. She insisted. Ms. Lane mouthed. Sophia's eyes were huge. She took in the flooded floor, the expensive misery. The woman at the center with bare feet and a man in a mop bucket's orbit. She lifted her chin with a calm Daniel had seen only when she was about to talk to doctors. Papa, she said. Ms. Lane says, that's a brave rule, she said, voice gone soft in a way that did something inconvenient to Daniel's entire existence. Sophia studied her face, reached up without permission, and swept wet hair off Clara's forehead with a child's careful hand. You look like you need a towel. I do, Clara said. Do you have one? In your fox pack? Yes, Sophia said gravely, and pulled one out like a magician. It had a faded cartoon rabbit on it. She placed it dignifiedly on Clara's head. The room laughed, a sound no one expected to make. It broke something that needed breaking. Evan snorted. This is a circus. Sophia turned her head, eyes narrowing with 8-year-old precision. You're mean, she said. Then to Clara still loudly, because microphones have never been invented in the minds of children. Are you the lady from the picture on our fridge? Daniel and Clara froze at the same time. They weren't the same picture, but the angles met. What picture? Sonal asked, too bright. Sophia fished a folded printout from her backpack's front pocket. It was a copy of a copy, blurred at the edges. Her grandmother, Daniel's mother-in-law, had it taped to her fridge. A community art fair poster from a decade ago. 2 women in front of a wall of children's drawings. One Marisol, hair loose, paint on her cheek. The other younger, pre-CEO. A gravity about her that was different but already loud. The caption. Bay Hollow Art Collective, Community Day. Clara's hand rose like someone had attached a string to it. She touched the paper without stealing it. That was a long time ago, she said, and her throat made a sound that could have been a laugh if you tilted your head. You knew my mom, Sophia said, unspooling this like it was thread she'd always had in her pocket and finally found the end. Clara closed her eyes once. When she opened them, they were shinier than lenses permit. I did. Evan pounced. Ha! Stop talking, Sonal said to him like he was a faucet. Daniel exhaled like he'd been underwater for 30 years and only now remembered air. He stepped toward the 2 people holding the entire room's attention and knelt so his head was between them. He looked at Clara. Explain, he said, and the word held fury and plea, and something that felt against all his intentions, like forgiveness waiting at a distance with its jacket on. Clara looked at Sophia. Your mother, she said, and that name like a grace, taught me that love is not a transaction. She taught me you can be poor and still not owe anyone your soul. She taught me to draw a straight line when the paper buckles. We were. She stopped and then did the hardest thing in a room like this. She told the whole truth, not a pretty shard. We were in love once. It was a long time ago, and it was messy, and it was the kind of love you pack carefully and take with you even after it stops being the thing you call love with your mouth. She chose your father, she was right to. He's the best good I ever met. I left because I wanted to be the kind of person who could be chosen and I didn't know how. So I turned myself into someone no one could touch. The room went so quiet, even the water made a different sound. I didn't pay enough, she said. So softly Daniel almost didn't hear it. Not for what I owed her. I threw money at the world and hoped it trickled to the right places. I didn't show up at the hospital because I thought my presence would hurt more than help. I told myself a story that made me a hero. It was a lie. So when I saw you, she glanced at Daniel, and it was the opposite of a weapon. When I saw your daughter, I remembered who taught me to hold a pencil. And last night I did a cruel thing disguised as strategy. I asked a man to lie because I didn't know how to ask him to stay. Sophia's small hand found Clara's bigger, wet one and squeezed like a person testing whether a thing is real. My mom said people who don't know how to ask for help make messes, she said. Then she said, we still love them. Clara made a sound that happened in her chest, and then somewhere outside of her too. She sank to her knees in the puddle. Water soaked the hem of that dress that had once been a weapon and was now just fabric. She looked at Daniel like there was a bridge between them, and she had decided to walk it in bare feet regardless of nails. I can hate you for leaving, Daniel said, eyes hot and his mouth refusing to be eloquent. I probably will, but I cannot pretend I don't understand the kind of leaving. That's for survival. And I cannot pretend I didn't see the way you looked at Sophia, like someone remembering their own childhood and trying to put it back on the shelf differently. A noise overhead, harsh. Merton, soaked through, came in with two officers from corporate compliance who had the resigned faces of men who had seen this show and would prefer a quieter matinee. Mr. Roth, he said, you'll need to come with us. What is this farce? Evan demanded. The part where the log's Sonal likes finally found their audience, Merton said, and the part where your assistant cried in the stairwell and handed me a thumb drive because she doesn't get paid enough to go to jail. Evan turned to Clara with a hatred that brightened him into something ugly. Enjoy your little morality play, he spat. You won't survive it. Perhaps not, she said, but the people in Bay Hollow will. She took Sophia's towel off her head and handed it back with ceremony. Thank you. As they led Evan out, microphones bobbing after him like hungry fish, the boardroom slackened like a muscle unclenching. Sonal exhaled 3 meetings worth of breath. We still have to run a company, she said to Clara, then to Daniel. Would you like a job not defined by the number of toilets per hour? Daniel blinked. I already have a job. You have an underpaid job, Sonal corrected. How about Director of Facilities and Community Partnerships? She smirked at her own title-making. It's real. We need someone who knows the building and the neighborhood. You know both. He glanced at Clara, then away. We'll talk, he said carefully. After I pick up my kids' art from Ms. Lane's room. Clara laughed, short, unguarded. Director, she tried the word on him like a gift. Of foxes, of leeks, he said, and straight lines. Come by tonight, she said, then immediately looked like she regretted the boldness. If you want, I'll be home late. The refrigerator hums. He didn't mean to, but he smiled. I like that sound. They walked out together. Reporters parted around them like a sea that hadn't decided whether to drown or baptize. Outside, the rain had finally begun in earnest, the real kind, not engineered. It smelled like the city rinsing itself enough to smell brand new, if you were kinder than the facts allowed. Clara's shoes were in her hand. Sophia walked between them, holding both their fingers in her small ones, swinging their arms like bells. On the sidewalk, the neighborhood kids whose parents worked in the tower peeked from the awning of the coffee stand. A barista Daniel knew only as tattoos raised a cup and said, "On the house, to no one in particular and to everyone." "Tonight," Clara said to Sophia, as if they had already had 10 years of practice at being gentle, "if your dad says yes, I could read you a story." "What kind?" Sophia asked. "Practical." "The kind where the fox learns a new way," she said. Sophia weighed the answer with chief executive seriousness and then nodded once. "Okay." Clara looked at Daniel. The air between them wasn't less heavy. It was honest. "Wait now. We can't go back," she said. "But we can go forward. That's the only direction I know," he said. She hesitated. "Pretend you love me for 10 minutes, she said, not as a weapon or a strategy now, but as a callback to the worst thing she'd asked, and the only way she knew how to say the best one. He looked at her, at his own reflection in her eyes, at the life he'd built from second-hand things that fit him better than firsts ever would. He looked at Sophia's hand in theirs, bridged between worlds that weren't as far apart as the people inside them insisted. "How about we start with 10 minutes, he said, "and no pretending." Her laugh came from deep, shook her shoulders. She nodded and didn't try to fix it with words. That evening, the company put out a statement that sounded like a statement. The injunction turned into a case. The case turned into a plan. The plan turned into trucks and men in boots and women in hard hats and engineers who didn't care about cameras and kids whose coughs got better over months, not days. It did not happen like magic. It happened like work. In a small kitchen that hummed like a memory that had learned a better ending. A fox drawing took a place on the fridge next to a photo from a decade ago and a new photo from last week. A CEO with her hair unarmored laughing with an 8-year-old who had put a towel on her head like a crown. The man who once smelled of bleach now came home smelling sometimes of sawdust, sometimes of rain, sometimes of the faint chemical tang of a floor that had decided to hold its shine a little longer. He still wore second-hand shirts because they felt like stories. He bought a new pair of shoes because Sophia said the old ones squeaked at church and distracted the fox. On a late night, when the building had gone to sleep and the city had quieted enough to hear the refrigerator sing its old song, Clara stood in the doorway of that kitchen and watched Daniel scrape peanut butter across bread. He did it like a man building a bridge out of small plus steady. Sophia slept with a book under her cheek. "Bay Hollow's first clean soil sample came in today," Clara said. "We're under the threshold." He looked up. He didn't react big. He had learned that the most important news lands the same as the less important kind. The only difference is how long the echo lasts. "Good," he said, and meant it like a prayer said without words. She crossed the tile in bare feet and leaned her shoulder into his. It was quiet enough to hear her heartbeat move like a small animal between ribs. He put the knife down and turned to her, and the history in the room didn't vanish. It rearranged itself to make space. 10 minutes, she said into his shirt, a smile in the syllables. "Forever's just 10 minutes repeated a lot," he said. "Ambitious," she said, "like ambition were a joke you could tell at your own expense now." He kissed her forehead. It was not a gala. There were no violins. There was not a single chandelier pretending to be a star. There was only the hum and the smell of lemon and a child's steady breathing. And a city that, for once, felt like it might allow two people to be the size they were without a fight. In the morning, it would all be complicated again. Boardrooms would return. Headlines would turn. Systems would do exactly what systems do when they realize a new variable has entered the room. But tonight, the refrigerator sang, and a fox on a fridge flew, and a woman who had taught herself to be impossible lowered her weight onto the floor of a life where she could be held. And a man who had spent years fixing other people's leaks found a way to stop one in himself. All of it earned, not easy, all of it true.